tell us more about how this journey in this book, taking you from, your heart being broken to being where we at the end of the book, where Phoenix Rising and onward is what comes up towards the end of the book. How does it take you through that process of having the pain and finding those kernels and rising upward?
Yeah, great question. I imagine the process is different for everyone in terms of the details, obviously. But if we think about pain and grief, and however pain might make itself into our existence, whether we have a trauma as a young person, whether we have, early family experiences that drive how we limit ourselves, those things are very heavy. They're super, super heavy. They're energetically heavy, and they suck energy. They're like black holes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people, if we really think about it, I would invite people listening, honestly, to really consider this, just to reflect on this, because we
Welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship. And today we are with Melanie Curtis, who actually, her highest accolade is, I just adore her. She's also a consultant, a coach, an author, a speaker, a skydiver, but in general, she is the Sherpa for type A's who are looking to have a more compassionate and fulfilling and still successful life. How are you today, Melanie?
Rich, I love you. I am so thrilled to be here, and I'm excited for this. So let's dive in, whatever.
And full disclosure, Melanie was my coach for a year. And when we were working together, I never would have imagined, in my wildest dreams, that I would be interviewing you on a podcast about relationships. Right? Because at the time, I was running this landscape design company, and Melanie was trying to help me keep my hair.
Life takes us in interesting places, doesn't it, my friend?
Yeah. And I will add that, Melanie, I'm going to say for everyone that you so much inspired me to become a coach in the way that you worked with me and the way that you were present with me. And I'm just eternally grateful for our friendship and for the work that we did together.
Thank you, my friend.
Yeah. Well, I want that on the record, recorded.
I receive you. I receive it. And I love you so much.
And so today, what inspired this is on my birthday, Melanie sent me this book that she wrote with some friends called With Our Whole Broken Hearts. In complete transparency, I thought, a book that a friend's written. I guess I'm going to have to look at this, right? Because how many friends do we have that have written books? I've actually have a lot of friends that have written books. But I started to read this book and I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. And so in alignment with some of the needs of some of the people that I work with, we've got to talk about this book.
Yeah, I really think it is one of the hidden gems. I create so much. I put out so much content. I'm very prolific in my creating and my self-expressing. It's part of my soul fuel. It's part of my business. It's a really integral part of my existence. But this particular piece of work, I'm very excited that it's getting a little bit of its own airtime, because it's really underserved piece. And I send it to every person that I feel like needs it, that is in a period of heartbreak, that is maybe struggling. We wrote it with the intention of it being a friend. So it's the person who maybe doesn't know how to support someone in heartbreak or going through a divorce or something like that. And so you read the stories inside that are very intimate, very honest and raw and real. And our hope is that those reading it feel less alone in their own pain and their own process. And so I really appreciate the space to talk about it.
Yeah. And so some people will be listening to this. Some people will be watching it. So I held it up for the people who are watching it. For the people who are listening also, With Our Whole Broken Hearts, it's presented. It's almost like, well, it's a series of stories, but there's no index in it. There isn't an introduction by a famous author. It's very organic and warm, and you go through it. It's this great mix of like the heart of Melanie and the other authors, and these incredible graphic images, and it's also broken up into sections, which I kind of went through. There's the unknown. There's what is it? The shattering moment, red flags, bottoming out, and confidence. And so and it's very logical. The sections are very logical, but still, it's got this great. You read it. It looks handwritten. You know what it reminds me of? It kind of reminds me of nobody's young and old enough to remember this book. Be Here Now by Baba Ram Dass. So
Ram Dass, yes.
Richard Alpert, who's like
Ram Dass is what's up.
Oh, people still into him? Cool.
Yes.
So, but I mean that book, it had the same. That book has the same feeling. It was like it's more like a creation than a book. Is probably the best way to put it.
It's a graphic memoir, but even in terms of graphic memoir creation, it is that much more organic. So it doesn't look and feel like a comic book, which a lot of graphic memoirs can, which can still be very rich and beautiful and raw and real and all the things. But one of my co-authors, Kirsten Kramer, she is the artist that drew all of the images in the book. But yeah, the images support the storytelling in a really profound way, I think. And yes, the stories would be absolutely rich and powerful, I think, on their own, but with the images in this graphic memoir format, it makes it that much stronger. And the other thing I like about this book is you can read it in 20 minutes or 25 minutes. It's not a book like, oh God, I have to sit. It's really like one sitting, devour it, and you're gonna feel something as a result of that.
Yeah, and there were two images that got me right from the beginning, right? The first one is in the very beginning. There's a picture of a heart with some of that caution tape around it that says under construction. And I thought, oh, wow, so sweet. And then I went to the next page, and there's an image of that same heart, and it's been run over. Like there's tire track marks over it, and it says, just think positive. And I thought, like, that grabbed me because, like, the problem I have with so many coaches in particular, like I have a whole rant I've done about coaches since I read this book, is that there's a whole movement in coaching that you should always focus on the positive and work with affirmations, and those hurt feelings and sadness, they're all, and pain, that's all good and everything, but really you want to stay positive, because where you look is where you end up, and if you spend time in that stuff, you're just going to be sad and angry and unhappy forever. And I think there's something really missing in that approach.
Absolutely.
So I'd love to hear more about that. Like, what inspired that image, and how does the book express that?
It's that image in particular. I think it's important that the book opens with those two images, because I think we all can relate on some level to a broken heart, whether it is in a divorce process, whether it is in loss of a loved one, whether it is in loss of a job, or some other really catastrophic, life-changing moment. And then we also can relate to that culture that you just described, that is about this sort of overt uber positivity, which absolutely, in my opinion, entirely misses the mark, because it's like how Brené Brown describes it. And she says, you cannot selectively numb. So if we avoid the dark corners of our psyche and our hearts, and we avoid the grief, and we bury it and we close it up, it will come out in more toxic and painful ways later, or it will literally kill you physically. That's my opinion. And if we do have the bravery to go there, to get help with our therapist, to cry, to talk to our friends, to go to that retreat, to whatever, just face the darkness that's there for us, that gives way to levels of joy and connection that we cannot access otherwise.
Yeah, and let me just say that we're doing this episode post. I'm going to call it post-pandemic, even though there's still stuff going on out there. And one of the big concerns that I and many other folks have had is that there has not been a lot of expression of grief of the 2 years of the losses that we had,
Yeah.
all kinds of losses. And that what happens when we don't have expression of grief is we shut down emotionally, or we explode in all kinds of unexpected ways. And, if you look at what's going on in the world right now, it's no wonder that the economy is a little sideways, and there's a lot of fear out there, a lot of uncertainty out there, a lot of aggression going on. It just seems to all have come out at once. And it isn't just the media, folks. But the other part of this is, it isn't, at first I sort of started out saying, oh, my problem with the coaching industry. It is not really the coaching industry. There's something about American culture in particular. There's this, when the going gets rough, the tough get going. And when you fall off a horse, you get back in the saddle. And, we have a whole culture that's built on stay positive, keep moving forward, stay focused on the goal.
Hard work, work hard, play hard.
Right. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that stuff. And, if you fall off the horse and you've broken a bone and you don't reset it, there's going to be a problem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I liken heartbreak to physical surgery or some kind of physical pain. No one would ever question a person taking some time to heal and recover if they broke their leg. Not one person. Yet, when we break our heart and we have an emotional wound that is just as literally painful, there's science behind that, we don't allow that we don't actually have space for that. And I think that is a really important thing. I think when we talk about it in terms of culture shift, I love that it's being talked about as a culture shift. And I think the pandemic, at least in my experience, forced so many of us, at least for me, I can only speak for my experience, but man, you know me, Rich, I really am, I'm a highly energetic person because I am really fueled by what I do. Like, I know how you usually start your podcast. You're like, what was your heart's calling to your stuff? And it's like, for me, I love my work. I love people. I love real and honest connection, which is why I can so rigorously hold space, right? So you've experienced that with me, right?
And by the way, how did your heart lead you to your work?
That's my answer, is that true calling, that calling in me to connect and be deeply and honestly and wholly connected with the people that I love. And for me, my spiritual practice and my spiritual, existence, I don't even know what to call it, but like that part of my life expands to humanity, to other things. So that love is, I aim to practice in those universal love spaces. It doesn't mean I don't have boundaries and I let people who, disrespect or don't respect all those things, I don't let those people close to me. That's the more micro of skill building. But when I think about what's drawn me to my career and why do I self-express? Why do I torture myself to be a writer at all? Is because I believe that kind of expressing and that kind of sharing from the depth of my experience and pain and joy and whatever humanness is of highest service to the world and to myself. So both I get it expressed out of my body and I am being of service at the same time. It's like the ultimate win-win.
Yeah. I think of it as a triple win, because you win, the people in your immediate space win, and then there's the benefit to the greater good.
Totally.
Love it. Love it. Hey, and so let's go back to the book for a second. So here's what I'm thinking about this. What I know about grief, about sadness, about hurt, about fear, about anger, about even blame, is that the seeds of what we really want and need are inside of that. And so the problem when we ignore those feelings is that we ignore what we really want. We may think we're going for what we really want, but we can't really know what we really want until we look at what most hurts us or what most threatens us or what most makes us angry. So tell us more about how this journey in this book, taking you from your heart being broken to being where are we at the end of the book? Where Phoenix Rising and onward is what, you know, is what comes up at the towards the end of the book. How does it take you through that process of having the pain and finding those kernels and rising upward?
Yeah, great question. I imagine the process is different for everyone in terms of the details, obviously, but if we think about pain and grief and however pain might make itself into our existence, whether we have a trauma as a young person, whether we have, early family experiences that drive how we limit ourselves, those things are very heavy. They're super, super heavy. They're energetically heavy and they suck energy. They're like black holes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people, if we really think about it, I would invite people listening, honestly, to really consider this, just to reflect on this, because we can see this, like there's this sort of negative, quote unquote, energy that is very heavy. And so the beauty in going toward those things and actually working to like get them out, however we're going to figure out how to do that through whatever healing modalities we find. When those things are actually uprooted and pulled out, there is an unbelievable energy surge of possibility, of connection. We feel free. So it sounds kind of not that inspiring, I think, to talk about it generically, but like in the space of the story, what I love about the story. And so this, I kind of feel like I have to share some of my story in the sense that I described my deep calling to being in connection with others.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes sense that I would have a corresponding fear around being disconnected from others. And so when I, as a person, would experience perceived rejection or disconnection or withdrawal, if we talk about the more clinical, therapeutic, anxious attachment type of experience for people, that was extremely triggering for me and extremely painful for me. And so I had to figure that out, like why? So I had to go there. I had to really go there. And this is a years-long process for me, Rich. So it's not quick work, but
Mm-hmm.
it is so, so necessary. And so you see that in the story too, like in my heartbreak, I have systems of support, like the section where I write about my clients who stuck with me while I was taking this world tour, trying to find myself and challenge the model of mobile entrepreneurship and do this big thing because I had this vast void in my life that I didn't anticipate. I was trying to turn it into something really good, and it was good, but I still was really, really heartbroken at that time.
But it was so cool also.
It was cool.
Like full
It was
disclosure,
cool.
I was on calls with Melanie while she was on the world tour, and she'd be like calling me from, a bathroom in Bombay or something. Like it wasn't quite that bad, but she would say, it's a little noisy here. There's stuff going on. I don't know if my connection's okay. And it would be, and I was just like, yeah, let's do this. I was so inspiring that Melanie was like, I've decided. One of the things that made me want to move into coaching was, wow, that's so cool. She can work from anywhere.
Yeah.
Right? Like nothing is stopping her. I want to be unstoppable. So, I want you to know that like you were struggling and going through some stuff, and it was totally inspiring.
Thank you. I mean, that was the hope, and that's, I think, something also really important to talk about when we talk about heartbreak. And if we're trying to be of service to people listening who are in the heartbreak experience or in the divorce experience, it can feel so easy inside of that pain and that struggle to feel like we can't do anything else, or we have to put things on pause because we're not at 100%. I don't know about you, man, but it is rare that I show up to any space and feel actually legitimately, quote unquote, 100% prepared. It is almost a never scenario. And that might seem impossible because I do a great job. I'm not even dissing myself. I know I do a great job, but like the world tour is such a great example because that was the heart of when this book was really occurring, the stories that were in the book. And it speaks to how much we actually can do, even when we're in such a challenged state. So we can allow ourselves to entertain possibilities, and that can be soul fuel in itself, on top of the safe and supportive systems and people that we have around us.
And we're going to go a little over today, folks. Just heads up. This is Melanie. We're going to go a little longer today. And I want to drive home why it's so important to embrace the negative or destructive feelings. And by embrace, I don't mean like you get angry and you decide that you're just going to be angry and like ride that wave of rage. That's not embracing. That's when the feeling is having you, and that's not something we really want. That feeling rarely has taken me any place good. I'll just put it to you that way.
Yep.
Like the only setting I can imagine that might be helpful is if I'm under physical attack. And I really need that kind of insane energy that, that I'm going to fight against all the odds. I don't care if I die, I'm going to kill him. Like that's the only place I can see where that feeling might have a place. And honestly, I haven't been put in that situation since I was 15. So, it's pretty rare that any of us confront that. But the importance of these feelings is the importance of having them or giving ourselves the space to have them. Is, as Melanie pointed out, if we don't have them, they suck the emotional energy out of everything else. And sort of going to what I was saying earlier about the seeds of what we want being in there, it's also a part of like any transition. Like I'm thinking about I'm working with a lot of people who are divorcing a toxic spouse right now. And so the transition that they're making is who they thought they were going to be with that person when they met them. Oh my God, they were so fabulous. They were in love. They had dreams they created in their own minds, if not with the other person. And then there was the reality of what was going on, which usually shows up when they have kids with them. They're like, wait a minute, that might be okay for you to talk to me that way, but this is an innocent. You can't be like that with them. The reality of the situation comes to them. And in order to move from that, there's like the loss of that dream. There's the sense of being a victim that you put your children in a relationship with them, however irrational that is, because you wouldn't have those kids unless you were married to that person, but it's still there. It's still present. There's guilt and shame of, oh my God, I exposed myself to that. If we don't allow ourselves to have all of those feelings, then those feelings are forever present and pulling us down. But when we allow ourselves to have them, and let's say like in a limited setting, like a mourning, mourning, like when somebody you love passes away. In some cultures, you sit for 6 or 7 days and you just allow yourself to mourn, and you don't even have to bathe, and people feed you, and you sit there and whine and complain, and everyone says, oh yes, it's so awful. And then on like day 7, you get off your ass, you take a shower, you put on some colorful clothes, and you're like, all right, I'm done with that. It doesn't mean that you don't experience sadness afterwards, but there's a beginning and an end. And you allow yourself to really have it so that you can release it. Yeah. Right. If we don't allow ourselves to have that kind of experience with these feelings, it's almost impossible to really see what the next steps are, what the future is, what is that bright and shiny future? What is that compelling future that's going to drive my life? What are the things that bring me joy? Because that stuff is just in the way. And that's what makes this work and this kind of book, like with our whole broken hearts, so important, is that it validates that process.
Yeah. And it is a process. Like that's something I think we should speak to, is that for most people, every single client I have ever worked with, and whether they're experiencing heartbreak or some other kind of challenge, all are emotionally based. Every single client, including myself, wants things to happen sooner than they happen. I cannot tell you how many times in my
I want what I want when I want it.
And I want it right now. How many times, right, in my heartbreak journey and my healing journey, was I like, WTF, what the hell am I missing? Why is this taking so long?
This is like the cleanest conversation you and I have ever had right here. WTF, that was good.
Look at me. I'm a grown-up. But seriously, though, that is important to know, because a lot of people think, and I've seen this again with so many of my clients and also myself, we can think that feelings are failure, that, oh, somehow I'm screwing up because I'm still feeling. No, the grief process is who knows what it is. It's very different and dynamic for everyone. And we also, certainty, this is something I say a lot. Certainty is very seductive in the sense that we want to know, oh, I want that idea, that perfect idea. Oh, now I know what the future is going to be, so I can get on with freaking out about losing all my dreams, which is, again, a huge piece of grief when we're talking about divorce. It's a shattering of of our reality. We thought that things were one way. We thought this was going to happen. And so it's very, very unsettling, and it takes time to put those pieces together. So one of the things that can happen is people want to just pick a new idea. This is why rebound relationships happen. And it's like, no problem. I have zero judgment. I did that, like, it happens. But you don't understand that what you're seeking is this certainty that you really can't have yet. But what you can do is you can go toward things that are in a direction that feel good to you, that feel healthy to you, right? So yeah, I did this big world tour. I didn't know what was going on. And I honestly, during it, I just intuitively, I checked in with my intuition, even amidst all the pain I was feeling and all the fun I was having and all the wild emotions that were going on. I continued to check in with my intuition, and it told me, I have no idea why I'm really doing this, but I feel like I need to see it through. Because there's a lot of times I could have gone home early and just gone to my mom's couch and cried a bunch, and that would have been fine too. My intuition took me another way. And that speaks a little bit toward I know the last question that you asked also about legacy, but I'll wait to share that point.
Oh, I have another question.
Yeah. Well, I'm prepared.
You are prepared. Hey, so there's one more point I want to make about these negative feelings. And the thing is that when we allow ourselves to have them, it isn't about having them so we can just get rid of them. Like what embracing destructive emotion that it's in us, that it lives in us, does is it also gives us the ability to connect with other people. So when we shut that down, when we shut down those feelings, our ability to connect with other people becomes more limited. Absolutely. And the truth is, to be whole and complete human beings, we need to not only allow ourselves to have, sadness, sense of victimization and loss, but if we want to have kind of that experience of connection to something bigger than ourselves and creativity and, that willingness to sacrifice ourselves for others or looking for the win-win. And I know, Melanie, you know the language I'm talking here. You got to have those things. It's all connected. So the reason why it's helpful to have those feelings, but not let them have you, is that when you have them, you can connect to all that other stuff. And so when we limit any area of ourselves emotionally, it limits all the other areas. You can't have one without the other.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things, and I'm going to say two things that I think will be actually pragmatically useful, I hope, for people listening, is because what do we do, right? How do we, quote, hold ourselves accountable relative to emotional growth? It's like a weird thing, right? It's not like you're doing something literally. I mean, sometimes you are. Sometimes you're doing some ritual or some kind of whatever. But when we're talking about the internal process, one of the things that's really important is accepting our humanity. That can be such an emotional salve, but the other reason why we need to accept our humanity is not only to give ourselves a break and to truly be able to rest into that acceptance, which allows us to heal emotionally, is that also and I don't know about you or what your core audience maybe resonates with, but I absolutely had the old perfectionist, people-pleasing tendency where other people's needs, I would put them ahead of my own.
Mhm.
And that, of course, led to breakdowns and loads of different breakdowns in my life and different pain points. But no, perfection is not relatable. It actually is a piece, and Brene says it like this, but it is also armor to keep us disconnected from other people. So you talk about the importance of connection. So we have to accept our humanity. What we don't, I mean, you don't have to, but I really implore you to do that, to really start to try to practice that. And that's a mindset practice. When you see yourself judging yourself, you start to think about these things
Mhm.
and know that when given the opportunity to share with other people, you share from that real place, as opposed to sharing, how are you doing today, Rich? Oh, I'm fine. Oh, I'm good. Things are good. Things are
Everything
good.
is
Just
good,
think
right?
positive. Just think right? It's okay in safe spaces and safe relationships to allow our deeper and broader and more painful humanity to be seen. That is part of the healing as well, in my
Mm.
experience.
Love
So
it.
not just because of the book, but because of all the coaching spaces and therapy spaces and those things that I've done that are clearly part of the healing.
Love it. Yeah. And so I'm just going to say, for my toxic spouse clients, the other reason why this is so important is, you know, if you have children with them, you're going to need to have some kind of connection with that toxic person. And the whole thing of connecting and having empathy and understanding is going to be vital in figuring out how to do that without absorbing all that poison again. All right. So in general, though, folks, I know that people are going to want to find your book. How do they find With Our Whole Broken Hearts, a graphic memoir?
Well, they can go to withourwholebrokenhearts.com. That's the direct place to the book. It's on Amazon and all that. But you certainly can go to my website, melaniecurtis.com. Everything's there as well.
And that's how they can find you.
Yeah. And one thing, I just want to say one last thing, Rich, if it's okay,
Of course.
is that we talked a lot about mindset stuff, but one last seed I want to plant for people that are listening is that there are skills that we can build and learn that will help us create new futures, right? If we don't learn new skills, we will very likely repeat the same relationship patterns. We will have the same outcomes. And there are things that we can learn. If we talk about dealing with a toxic person, there are things we can learn about. How do I affect boundaries? How do I communicate that? How do I engage and connect to empathy while in the face of being wildly triggered by someone I loathe at the moment, so there's stuff that can be done inside those micro experiences. So I just want to plant that seed.
Absolutely.
And Rich is the person to talk to about
That's
that.
very sweet of you. I would add that whether you're in a relationship that feels good or bad right now, or whether you're solo, that as human beings, we are basically purpose-driven creatures. And my evidence for that is that people who retire usually die within a year of retirement, not because because the Grim Reaper has got a notification board, but because they lose their sense of what their place is in the world.
Yeah.
They lose their sense. And the people who retire and don't die within a year usually get active in some way, maybe with a charity, or they find something that feels purposeful or missional for them.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to encourage all of our listeners to think about what feels purposeful. It doesn't mean that you have to be like Mother Teresa, like you're on a divine mission, though. You could be like, I would honor that. Like, I think that's super cool. If you have that going on, go for it. But it's just what gives your life meaning. And along with that, in order to fulfill our purpose, there's sort of a continuous, I sound like a Kaizen guy from Japan. There's a continuous improvement process that we all want to be engaged in. We want to be, to the best of our abilities, improving our relationship with our body, our relationship with our emotions. What's your emotional, what is it? EQ, your emotional intelligence. That's the word.
Yeah.
Because that word intelligence is elusive sometimes. What are you doing with your intellect? Like my mom's 87 and she's like dedicated to crossword puzzles and stuff like that because she knows it keeps her mind sharp. What do you do for your spirit? And I don't necessarily mean religion. What's your sense of connection to others? And it's really about, sometimes when we're going through those destructive or negative emotions, we feel like we're the center of the universe and how could this happen to me? But when we have a connection to something bigger, other people, nature, the ocean, trees, whatever it is, we start to realize that, yeah, I'm in pain, but I'm a grain of sand. And you know what? I'm going to make it through this just like all the other grains of sand. What are our values and principles that are driving us through this? And then it comes back to that sense of mission and purpose. Like if we're always improving in these 6 areas, in little ways, little incremental ways, then we're always going to have growth and something new and change and shifting. But boy, it sounds like a lot of work. I don't know, Melanie.
I know there's a lot of surrender. There's a lot of ups and downs. And it's like, not to plug my podcast, but like Trust the Journey is the name of my podcast. And it's because I think you live long enough, life kicks the shit out of you, pardon my French. And you learn that, it really is about the journey. And sometimes the greatest gifts are found in the trenches, who shows up for you, how you get through it, the strength you didn't realize you had, all that stuff you hear. It's kind of tough to hear when you're in it. But then once you start to emerge, you're like, oh yeah, that is me. Dang, cool. And so, yeah, I mean, I feel like compelled to share about the legacy. I thought is that that's something, if we talk about what drives me or what I hope to be a legacy, it can be lots of different things, but I do care very much about living my life fully and wholly, completely, as contribution, as an example of what's possible. And so that's another thing that like drove me through this period of going, what can I do? How can I model what being brave, which can sound so trite, what does that look like? And so when we talk about emotional pain, that is, in my view, the bravest work there is, when we actually go to those dark corners and we allow ourselves to feel through with professional support and guidance to help us really, really heal and transform ourselves. Like that, I am a totally different person than when I wrote this book, and I was already pretty far through my journey. So I'm like, it's a sort of never ending growth process that is beautiful and wonderful. And I hope that my living it inspires other people to see what's possible for them too.
Well, I won't ask you what's the legacy you want to leave behind then. But I will say, everybody, if the links for reaching Melanie, for her podcast, for the book, will all be in the meeting notes, whether you're watching the video blog or watching the podcast. So if you missed that, don't worry. And I will also say, Melanie, that you are one of the most courageous and inspiring people that I know. And I'm so grateful to be your friend and to have you with me today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.